All righty, thank you guys so much for being here. We are now on the second agenda item for the day, which is how elections are conducted in Champaign County, which will serve as a panel-style conversation with Chief Deputy County Clerk Angela Patton, longtime election judge Jaye Covert, Nicole Frydman, who served as an election judge during the height of the pandemic and has also served as a poll watcher. And this session will be moderated by local podcaster Elizabeth Hess.
Thank you, Nicole. And go get some sleep. He is a 4-month-old, so we're going to all send him vibes to get some sleep. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us as part of Good Trouble Lives On. It's a weekend of learning, community, and action inspired by the life and legacy of Congressman John Lewis. John Lewis devoted his life to ending racial segregation, protecting voting rights, and reminding us that democracy only works when people participate. He encouraged us all to make good trouble, to stand up for justice, stay informed, and build stronger communities. But before we begin, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to the Spurlock Museum of World Culture, to stand up for justice, to open their doors, and for joining us and hosting us today. Let's give them a round of applause. We have 3 outstanding panelists with us today, and I would like to introduce first Angie Patton. She's the Chief Deputy Clerk with the Champaign County Clerk's Office. Angie grew up in Indiana and has called Champaign-Urbana home since 1996. As Chief Deputy Clerk, she plays a critical role in administering elections and ensuring they are secure, accessible, transparent, and fair for every voter in Champaign County. Outside of her professional role, Angie served as the 2025 Poet Laureate for the City of Urbana. She's a proud mother of 4 children, a recent empty nester, and she shares her home with 3, quote, badly behaved dogs. Our next panelist is Jeannie Covert. Jeannie, or Jaye, as many of us know her, is a lifelong member of the Champaign-Urbana community. After retiring from the University of Illinois, she continued serving others as a volunteer, mentor, and medical advocate for family and friends. Today, she joins us as a citizen election judge. She's a member of Champaign County Indivisible and NAACP Champaign County branch. Jaye has served as an election judge during both early voting and election day, primarily in rural polling locations, which I am interested in hearing about today, and at Church of the Living God. She became a commissioned election judge starting in 2012 through 2020. She took a break, as many of us need, and returned in 2025. Last but not least, Nicole Frydman. Nicole grew up in Southern California, has lived in New York, San Francisco, and Chicago before making CU home. She serves as the Manager of Communication and Development at the Spurlock Museum of World Cultures. She's also a founding member of the Urbana-Champaign Reproductive Justice. She's a member of Good Trouble Lives On Coalition. Nicole is currently pursuing a Master's of Social Work of Leadership and Social Change at the University of Illinois with the long-term goal of changing the world for the better. Thank you, Nicole. Small goal. If time permits, we will ask questions at the end, and I have recruited a microphone volunteer from my own home to walk around and help out with that. Angie, let's start with you. Who can vote by mail in Champaign County, and what steps are involved in signing up?
Okay, that's a really great question. Before I get started, I want to say just 2 quick things. One, I'd be very remiss if I did not point out my co-chief deputy in the clerk's office, Tony Caesar. Raise your hand. Tony has served for over 20 years in the clerk's office under multiple administrations, and she's my ride or die. So thanks for being here, Tony. I appreciate it. John Lewis is really the North Star for us and the county clerk's office. So just really honored to be here. So I want to give a quick history lesson, so bear with me here, and we're going to do a little show and tell. So people think that vote by mail got started in the pandemic, or it's a very new concept, and it's not. It got started in the Civil War, when soldiers were away from home and the government realized they needed to provide a way for military personnel to vote. So that is the origin story of vote by mail. So states decided to put something in place to allow, and it became vote by mail. Now, vote by mail's had a couple of name changes, like Prince. It used to be, everybody loves a good Prince reference. Thank you. But it used to be called absentee voting. And that meant that you needed to have a reason or an excuse to vote by mail. And now that is no longer the case. So what you'll hear it commonly referred to as vote by mail or vote from home. And that means that anyone can vote by, any eligible voter can vote by mail without reason or excuse. Where we're at right now in this election cycle for the midterm, we are preparing to send out applications. We're statutorily required to send you an application. Do not send it back with no, I don't want this, because we're required to do it. And those are going to be going out here pretty soon. So vote by mail starts to be mailed out September 24th, which coincides with the first day of early voting. So mark that on your calendars. There are two ways you can request vote by mail. You can request to be on the permanent list, which means that, and you can request that at any time in the election cycle. There's no time limit or anything like that. You can do it now. And that means when you sign up for vote by mail, you will automatically get a ballot. You don't have to continue to request. So that ballot's automatically going to come to you. You don't have to think about it, fill it out, send it back, postage is paid. The other way to do it is if you're, like to do it in person, but this time you need to vote by mail, you can request for a single election. And that's done within a certain time period. So that will start sometime in August, and you'll be able to request your vote by mail. But the point is that you have to fill out an application, whether you request single or for the permanent list. Where we've seen some confusion with voters is Illinois is a two-party system, so Democratic and Republican. And what happens is people are like, I'm nonpartisan. Well, when there's a primary, when you get that vote by mail ballot, the only thing that's going to show up on your ballot is referenda questions. So you got to declare, we advise you to declare a party and check that box so that you're not just getting referenda questions.
There has been a lot of doubt of the security of elections. Can you talk about that, and what is the Champaign County Clerk's Office doing to increase accessibility and safety for voters?
Are you on the first, the second question? Hang on a second.
We can make our way through the
Okay.
questions, but I'm actually asking about security measures. So let's go
Yeah.
through the vote by mail.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, from the top down, there has been some doubt whether or not it's actually safe
Yeah.
and whether it's secure and whether or not it should be eliminated. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about what
Yeah.
security measures are in place.
Yeah, that got introduced into the chat like as soon as president didn't like the election results, and they realized that party was losing by casting doubt about fraud and all of these things with vote by mail. So what has been reported is just the complete contrary to sort of like what's actually happening. There is just as much security, if not more, with vote by mail than there is for in-person voting. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So for our office, everything is done with two parties representing, right? So it's a Democratic and a Republican judge for every piece of vote by mail processing. This process is open to any poll watcher with credentials. You can come in and watch. Sometimes it's about as fascinating as watching paint dry, but it's open, it's transparent. You can come watch. It's very fascinating. People have learned a lot. League of Women Voters did a thing this last election where they were coordinating poll watchers so they could help share. This is a very transparent, in the light, process. So a Democrat and Republican election judge go to the drop boxes or the post office, pick up the vote by mail ballots. Again, postage is paid, and they bring it back, and there are security seals and documented everything for every single step. And they begin the process of scanning into the system, the opening, the signature verification. And that's sort of what I'm getting at with, there is just as much security with vote by mail than there is. So you go into a polling place, you vote in person, there's one election judge that is, checking your signature. When it's vote by mail, we have these giant screens set up in the vote by mail processing room. And these election judges, both Democrat and Republicans, there's usually 3 judges looking at these signatures as they come through after they've been scanned. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of like a better look at things. In-person processing is happening a little bit faster. There's also, they initial the ballots, they feed them in, and every step there is a security check. There's a lot of misinformation about people dumping in ballots. That's not a thing. It's not.
I'm glad you brought up the election judge process because not 2 election judges are the same. What exactly are some of the different jobs and what are some of the roles differentiating between early voting and election day?
Right. There are a lot more jobs than just election day work. So the most common is people sign up to work on election day. But there's also significant early voting, which we've expanded in the office. So you can request to be an early vote judge, which starts in September 24th and goes until the day before the election. And what's interesting about early voting is that you can do it in shifts, like a 4-hour shift. We can't do that. It's not allowed legally for us to break up shifts on election day. But early voting, if you're looking to serve the community, which we always need election judges, so we encourage everyone to sign up that's interested. You can work a 4-hour shift or an 8-hour shift or however long it is that you want to work. We also need help with our distribution of equipment to help sort as the equipment goes out to be delivered and come back. There's vote by mail processing where we need drivers, a Democrat and a Republican, to pick up those ballots and bring them back as a team. There's also tech support. So we have a pretty robust tech team, and they help support us during early voting and election day, and that helps answer questions from election judges and voters in real time, mitigate issues, fix printer problems, tabulator jams, those types of things. So just really quick to kind of go over the fee structure here. The stipend to work on election day is $220. It's the second highest rate in the state outside of Cook County. Election judges working early voting get $15 per hour. Distro team gets $17, and anybody helping with tech, it's $20 per hour.
All we hear about is accessibility and election integrity. So what has Champaign County done in order to increase accessibility to not just rural, but people in town as well?
A lot. We've done a lot. We've invested in a lot of infrastructure and equipment. And shout out to the county board and the finance director at the time that helped shepherd us through that process. Because when we came into the administration, they used a very outdated piece of equipment called the AutoMark, and it was like basically a 100-pound pencil. So it was quite cumbersome. Election judges used it to like throw their coats over, and it's like, we need to get really serious about accessibility. And the thing is, there are many ways to vote in Champaign County. There's vote by mail, there's early voting, there's voting on election day. There's something for everyone. And I'll give an example. My 80-year-old mother was a diehard, I want to vote in person, I want to, and I understood that. But as she entered into her 80s, there was a lot of, limited mobility and just not being able to do it. So she requested vote by mail. And after she did it once, she was like, I am never standing in line. I am never standing in line again. And that's the other thing that we encourage people to do, especially, there are gonna be long lines. We want voter turnout, but if you're gonna vote, if you're gonna wait till the last day to vote, you're gonna be standing in line. So take advantage of early voting and vote by mail. So we purchased express vote machines. And these machines, if you voted in Champaign County, are really just marking devices. You're not voting by a computer. Champaign County, under this administration, will always, 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 I know you're not supposed to use infinite words, but always have a paper ballot. And that allows for a really complete audit trail. So even if you're using these express vote machines because you have limited mobility or disability, like low vision, hearing impairment, or using a traditional marking device is gonna be difficult for you. These touch screens are just the marking device. And so you're still gonna get a paper ballot. Yeah, so we've invested, we've invested a lot, and we've tried to make it just as accessible as it could possibly be, from equipment to opportunities to vote, whether that's early voting or vote by mail. I do want to give one example because this really touched the staff. We had a gentleman that was legally blind, and prior to the express vote experience, you had to have a Democrat and a Republican judge come help you, and that's not as private and as dignified of an experience. And this gentleman came into the office after he had voted and wanted to talk to staff, and he was in tears because he was just so thankful. And you think, this is such a small thing, but it's a really big deal for people. So we're really proud of our work around that.
Last question before we give you a break. How is the clerk's office working to address election misinformation and disinformation?
Before I answer this fully, I gotta be honest. When I got into this, I came into the office in 2019. And I never thought in a million years we'd be in a landscape where the President of the United States is casting doubt on certified and audited election results because they didn't like the outcome. Right now, the president has removed members of the Election Commission. And why is this a big deal? Because these are the people within the government that help certify election equipment and keep the integrity of elections going. We have a national director of security candidate that refuses to admit who won the 2020 election. This isn't political theater for us. This is about as serious as it can get. And you've all seen reports about what is taking place at the behest and the encouragement of the president. We've had election judges, physically assaulted. We are in a very different space. So I'm here to tell you that the clerk and the election judges are the last line of defense in a democracy. And we take it very, very seriously. But to answer your question, to kind of give this a little more context, is we work really hard with partners who have put on this event. League of Women Voters, When We All Vote, See You Indivisible, Bend the Arc, all of these people. We did a thing with the League of Women Voters a couple of elections ago where it was a series that ran in the News Gazette. And it was like common questions that people were asking, and we gave them vetted answers from the office. We use traditional media, we use social media, which can kind of be a very slippery landscape, especially with the introduction of AI. So what we ask of people is when you're getting your news, and you want to share it that's election related, make sure you're sharing from a trusted news organization, not just some thing that's been put up, but an actual vetted news outlet. We really want to help and clarify as much as we can. Everybody has sort of like a story. Well, this happened at the polling place, and I asked my neighbor. That is great that you have a really good relationship with your neighbor. But if you need to know something and you have a question, call our office, email us. Our phone number is 217-384-3724. An election staffer will be happy to answer. If you want to email elections@champaigncountyclerk.il.gov. We're here as a resource. We use you guys to amplify, correct, and important information.
When I saw Angie speak at That's What She Said, I said in my head, I hope I never have to share a stage with her because just the charisma and the intelligence, and here we are. Look at that. Thanks, Marcy. So let's give her a big round of applause. Now, I've known Jeannie, or Jaye, for a long time, and you are just one of the people I know who have boots on the ground, so I appreciate what you do. We've heard from the elections office. Now we're going to hear somebody who's been in the trenches. Can you describe your experience serving as an election judge during early voting and on election day?
Election day it can be a mix, depending. I've had elections or served at elections on election day where it's been kind of quiet. Also depends on the location. I would say in the last 3 cycles, that has not been the case. Early voting, on the other hand, tends to be, sadly, very slow because a lot of people don't come out for the primaries, which is, I try to encourage people to do just that, whether it be vote by mail or actually coming out, just putting your vote out there.
Let's talk about what it's like to work rural versus urban. We mentioned this earlier. You worked Church of the Living God, the rural locations. Is it much different, or are people just there for the same benefit?
It's pretty different. Especially, I've been in Rantoul a lot. I've been in Tolono, and the Church of the Living God a lot. There's a really big difference, in my opinion. Some of the things that I've seen, depending on the election, the presidential election in Rantoul, there were some challenging moments. A lot of tensions high. I'll give an example of where it could get tense. Mostly it was great, though. I don't want to make it sound like we had a lot of trouble, but there was a case where somebody came into the polling place with a hat on, and it would be called electioneering. I asked him to please remove his hat. He could either fold it up and put it in his pocket, he could take it out back to his vehicle, or he could even just set it on the counter with it pointing towards the wall. And he said, why the hell do I have to do that? I fought for this country. And I said, this is called electioneering. It'd be like somebody else that maybe from a party that you don't like doing the same thing. How would you feel about that? He was like, well, I think I should be able to wear it. And we had a long line, and there was a person behind them that was kind of like, and yeah. And it was like, oh boy. But it took one of the male election judges to come up and back me up before the guy would back down. That was a little maddening. But we kind of tried to smooth things over so that by the time he left, I think that we had an understanding enough that it calmed down the other people in the line, because you could see that that crowd mentality starting to happen, and it was one of those things that makes you really edgy, and it's like, let's just nip this in the bud. So there were some people that didn't like having to turn a shirt inside out or put their cap in their pocket, whatever. That could have happened too at the Church of the Living God. We're talking about very different places and very different kind of people. I'll talk about the Church of the Living God. I love that place. Talk about the diversity. People come in and they're really pretty happy for the most part. Somebody didn't like the fact that we didn't have, that you can't vote independent. And I said, well, you have to talk to Clerk about that. There was nothing I could do for that. But overall, it's really quite a joy to be there. And I don't want to make it sound like the rural places were horrible. It's just that you find more people who are a little more tense. Is that better? Can you hear me? Okay.
Just a little further away from you.
Further? Like that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. So I also was in St. Joe too for a primary, and that was a sleeper. One of the things that strikes me about my experiences, I was in Tolono, last day of early voting, and there wasn't really a lot going on, and the other judge that I was working with said, I don't even know why we have primaries, and I said, why is that? And she goes, well, nobody comes out. Nobody wants to declare their party. So that was kind of interesting to learn. But I will tell you, with the new technology now, I love it. You don't have to ask the question, and they don't have to answer it where everybody can hear it. That is a beautiful thing. That's more encouraging to people to come out and vote in the primaries. I think for the most part, rural areas, I mean, you get a mix of people. I have people who, when they come in for a primary, I always like to try to keep it kind of low-key and say, what ticket can I get you today, R or D? Just so that they didn't have to say it, and try to make a little more fun out of it. But I heard people say, well, let's see, my dad was a Republican, so I better pick a Republican ticket. Or my husband votes like this, I better do that. I found that very interesting. So I will tell you just a quick story. The person I worked with in Tolono, on our way back to return the election equipment, I said, can I ask you a personal question? You can tell me to pound sand if you're not good with this. She said, okay. I said, how can you vote for somebody who talks to women like they do? And she looked at me and she goes, you know what? When you pull the curtain, nobody knows who you vote for. I found a lot of hope in that, because it's really true. So, so there were some fun parts of it, tense parts of it, but overall, I found it very rewarding to be in a rural area and be able to talk to everybody, about not everything, but you had a common ground no matter what, because you couldn't talk about certain things. So it just made a good place to be.
You've been doing this a while, and things have changed. As Angie referenced, electronics have changed. As a judge, and for those of us who go to the polls to vote, how would you say that things have changed the most?
I think the privacy in the tablet, and I always have felt like even registering somebody new right then really didn't take very long, and it takes even less time because now we can scan the driver's license and it autofills, populates. So I think that has improved. The privacy factor, I say that with the technology, that's been what I've found.
Would you say you've learned the most about yourself and about humanity serving as an election judge? That's kind of a broad question, but what is the biggest lesson you take away?
One of the things I would just say is that I am what I would call a late bloomer. I didn't vote till I was in my 40s, and because politics pissed me off, or whatever reason, there's a lot of people like that. And I would say that based on that, in a lot of ways, I didn't blossom until I was a little bit later on a lot of different levels. But what I would say is that what I learned from that and becoming an election judge, I think, was part of my growing, was because if I could complain about it or try to understand it, I needed to be in it. And to be an election judge, you get to see some inner workings. You get to see what's happening in the clerk's office. You get to see what's happening with other judges. You get to see the personal contact. That could be with candidates. It could be with poll watchers. And I've got a story about a poll watcher. Imagine that. No. So I would say that basically that's what I came to find out. And, being in that situation where you can't talk politics, you get to see the humanity of people because you get to talk about other things. It's a beautiful thing.
Last question before we move on to Nicole. Why do you encourage people to serve as election judges at least once?
I think seeing the system, if you have doubt or concerns, I think it's just a really good experience for the learning part of it, also as a civic kind of experience, so that you can talk to other people about it. I mean, I think it really helps expand your horizons and your outlook perspective on things. But I think that it also helps you be able to talk to other folks to encourage them. Here's the thing. We need election judges. And I know a lot of election judges. I mean, I'm already signed up for the midterms. And I've already done am I concerned about my physical? What am I concerned about? Or if I have concerns, you know what? I'm not concerned about my safety. This is a job that needs to be done. We need people to do it. And if we're going to stand up against someone who's going to put a lot of doubt into our elections, this is one way that you can stand up to it. Just be there. Stand up, speak out, make a little noise.
Thank you. Great answer. Nicole, I think we're going to kick yours off with, you're going to read us something, right? Would you like to start with what you've written? Or would you like to get to it?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a little context and then read it. Does that sound
okay?
good?
Yeah, please explain it. Now, this is one of the things I love about running panels. Everyone comes to it from a different angle and a different style, and Nicole's written something up that I read last night. It's very powerful.
So I just want to start by saying that the first time I was involved in anything having to do with an election, I was 8 years old, and Geraldine Ferraro had won the nomination for vice president, and my mother said that was too important to sit out. Rather than try to find and pay for childcare, she took me with her, and we went to knock on doors. That's the model I grew up with, and I've been involved a lot of different ways ever since. A lot of get out the vote, a lot of working with campaigns, a lot of voter registration, that kind of thing. But 2020, at the height of COVID, was the first time that I decided to step in to serve as an election judge. And I did so because I figured there might be a lot of people who had risk factors that made them not able to serve. It became a very formative experience for me. So the next day I sat down and wrote, which I do a lot. A lot of times it stays quiet, private in my journal. And then other times I choose to share it. I shared this one on social media, and I've cut it down quite a bit because it was much longer. But I'm just going to read it here for you all today. Before it fades from my memory, I wanted to write down what it was like to serve as an election judge on Election Day 2020. After training, I wasn't actually assigned to work, and I was disappointed. There are so few opportunities to feel like you can really help your community right now, and this was an important one. I kept hoping for a last-minute assignment. Late Monday afternoon, I was told I might get a phone call after 4 a.m. if a replacement is needed. Angie's laughing. She knows what this is all about. At 4:45 the next morning, my phone rang. I hadn't slept much, but I was out of bed instantly, threw on clothes, packed a lunch, made an absurd amount of coffee, and then promptly realized I'd be wearing a mask all day and wouldn't get to drink it. So I tried to finish it all during the 8-minute drive to the polling location I was assigned to. I got through most of it, go me. When I arrived, I met the 4 other election judges I'd be working with, and they weren't who I had expected. Poll workers are often retirees, but these men were all under 50. One had just graduated from college a few months earlier. During quiet moments, he read a book about engineering and social justice, and when I asked him about it, he said he was hoping it might help him figure out what to do with his life. He told me he volunteered because the people who usually do this were high risk and he wanted to help. We had that in common. In Champaign County, election judges come from both major parties, and many tasks require signatures from one Democrat and one Republican to certify they were completed fairly. Because of our last-minute replacement, our location ended up with 4 Democrats and 1 Republican, and that Republican judge worked harder than any of us. He was such a trooper. He had to participate in every bipartisan procedure from opening the polls to closing them, and he never complained once. The rest of us tried to shoulder every task we could so he could get a moment to catch his breath from time to time. And once we figured out which assignment he liked the most, we rotated him there whenever possible. It reminded me that elections don't work because everyone agrees. They work because people commit themselves to a fair process. My main assignment became helping voters whose situations weren't straightforward. Illinois allows same-day registration, address changes, surrendering vote by mail ballots, provisional voting, and that is wonderful for enfranchising voters. But it also means there's a lot of rules. Every time I encountered a complicated situation, I pulled out that big old manual, even if I'd solved that same problem 10 times already, because I strongly believe every voter deserves for us to get this right. My fellow judges dubbed me the Queen of Provisional Voting, a title I accepted with pride. One voter I'll never forget was a young man who learned he'd need to vote provisionally, and his immediate reaction was, I really need my vote to count. I understood why he was worried, so I slowed down. I explained exactly what provisional voting meant, why it existed, and how, if everything checked out as I fully believed that it would, his ballot would absolutely be counted. By the time he left, his frustration had turned into confidence. A small interaction, but it reminded me that sometimes democracy isn't just about counting votes. Sometimes it's helping someone trust that their voice matters and will be heard. That turned into a pattern. Many people arrived after first going to the wrong polling place. I'm gonna stop right here and just say that this has changed. We can vote anywhere now, but in 2020, that was not the case. Many people arrived after first going to the wrong polling place. Some had already driven across town. Some had waited in other lines. By the time they reached us, they were understandably frustrated. Whenever someone reached my table, I made it my mission to improve their day. One young woman had already visited 2 other locations before arriving at ours during one of our busiest moments. Every voting booth was occupied, so we had to pause check-in until someone finished. She was understandably exhausted, a little pissed. But by the time we were done together, she was smiling. She was proud she'd stuck with it and cast her ballot, but it made me wonder how many people had just given up. Near the end of the day, a couple came in, each of them with different voting problems they'd had in other places. They looked defeated. By then, my fellow judges already knew what was going to happen. I smiled and said, I'm gonna get you voted. It's what I've been doing all day. I got you. And I did. As they walked out, they called back, you're our hero. I almost cried then, still almost cry thinking about it now. There were so many moments. We celebrated every first-time voter. We entertained little kids so parents could get a moment apiece to vote. We thanked healthcare workers who came in wearing scrubs, clearly on a break, and they thanked us right back. One memory that delights me was our Republican judge working the ballot scanner, his favorite job. Every voter lives for that I voted sticker, right? And later in the day, when it became obvious we'd have plenty of stickers left, he started giving out 2 stickers to anyone who had an issue. You earned an extra one. People chuckled every time. It was such a small act, but after a difficult day, those little moments of kindness matter. Closing the polls took so much concentration, which is how it should be. We have to get this stuff right. But by the time we were done, we'd been working for roughly 17 hours. We were exhausted. But we also knew we'd accomplished something together. Here's the strange part. I don't actually know what my fellow judges look like. We wore masks all day. The only time any of us took them off was briefly while eating lunch outside alone. That's weird, especially because Brendan, Matthew, James, and Brian feel important to me, like important asterisks in my life story. And I doubt I'll ever see them again. The same is true for Eric, Kelly, Willie, Kalia, Anna, DeAndre, and many more voters whose names I don't remember now, all first-timers or voters with issues I solved, or people whose mood I just lightened a little in a tough situation. Look, the world has been hard. for a long time. Well before this or that president or this or that current crisis, it is far from new that racism exists, or sexism, or queerphobia, or ableism, or an economic crisis, or a war, or yes, even threats to our democracy. If you are walking around thinking this world is somehow worse than it used to be, that is misguided. Maybe from privilege, maybe. Just not enough knowledge of history. But today is no different than yesterday or the yesterday of yesterdays. People often talk as though our democracy depends only on presidents or governors or some candidate or another, but my experience has taught me something entirely different. Democracy also depends on ordinary people who wake up before dawn, read the manual one more time, answer one more question, calm one more anxious voter, and stay until every ballot is accounted for. The world has always had injustice and unrest, and it has always needed people willing to serve anyway. My election day was 17 hours on very little sleep. It was helping strangers cast ballots that would be counted. It was working alongside people with different backgrounds and different politics who share a commitment to fairness. It was one of the most meaningful days of public service I've ever experienced. And I am still proud that for one very long day, I got to be a part of democracy at work.
Thank you, Nicole. I only have time for one question for you, Nicole, before we open it up for if we have time for a few questions. Why do you believe civic engagement is more important now than ever?
I don't. And it's what I said in my little write-up here. It has always been essential. It has always mattered. And I don't think it matters now more than it did in any previous election. And I say that as someone who's been actively paying attention and working in each of those elections. We joke, right? Like, oh, this is the election of our lifetime. Oh, this one. But I mean, some of us are younger, some of us are not so much younger, but like, haven't we always, we say that basically every time, right? You know? Don't we remember hanging chads? Remember those, right? Like, this is not new, right? So, and I think a little bit of it goes back to what Jaye said, right? It's like, if I want to complain, I better have a stake in this, right? I better be involved in this, because then I got every right to complain, don't I? So I don't think it matters more. I think it matters the same, which is a lot.
Great answer. I am going to open it up for questions. I do have two already submitted from the audience. Eli is back here and will come around and bring a microphone over to you. But while we do that, thank you for your early submission. How does an election judge, I think this is for you, Angie, deal with the situation of an older person who comes in to vote whose signature has changed because of a stroke?
You know, we get this question a lot, and obviously, even me at 51, my signature's changed over time. It doesn't look the same as it did when I was 18. So we realize that signatures change for various different reasons, but this is the great thing about the new electronic poll books that we have. Previously, we had computers, so it was always electronic, but now we have these pads, and what it does is it records the signature in real time. So before, you would have the signature pad where you're going to sign. We don't have those anymore. It's all done on the poll book, so it captures that signature in real time, so there's never a need to mark on the signature pad, oh, this needs to get updated for this person. So just another way that we're trying to make it accessible and keep people voting.
Thank you. Eli, I believe you have a question here.
Well, I just have something I wanted you to react to. I was moved by the portion about election suppression, and it's so amazing that Trump can say it's he's an author of more suppression, more jiggering with the votes than anyone is. I cite Greg Palast, and I learned from him today that in the 24 cycle, something like 4 polling places were closed because of bomb threats in Georgia, around Atlanta, and Ossoff won anyway, but still. Since this is all about good trouble and John Lewis, I learned something from actually a short clip on Greg Palast's website, which is, everyone remembers the Birmingham bombings that killed those little children, but there's a backstory. That church was going to be a polling place the Tuesday following that weekend. So that's Birmingham. And it's sobering to think that we're going into this cycle with all these threats, but appreciate all your work.
I just want to touch on something really quick that I didn't say before, and I just want to make sure something's absolutely clear. Thank you for those comments, because this president has inserted a lot of things into the voting process and has tried to compromise. And thanks to these wonderful election judges and everyone that serves in Champaign County, we're doing really well considering. But one of the things that sort of played into this is the election denying. And what I mean by that is people that will not admit that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. And I want to be absolutely 1,000% clear. This will be a hill that I'll die on. No one who is an election denier should ever be put in the position of county clerk. I'm not just talking about here in Champaign County, I'm talking about across the United States. Absolutely not. Because they realize that the clerks have power in this space with elections. And that's, they are going to be the last line of defense. And one just quick thing about the polling places. From 2019 to where we are now, every election, there's been a little something that's happened in a polling location. There's been a disturbance, there's been an irate voter, and the last experience was in '24, and I think that was pretty well covered in the media. We had election judges get assaulted. I mean, this person was charged, thanks to the state's attorney, was held accountable and charged with a felony because the stuff is very, very serious. So we're doing all that we can with technology to make things accessible and to have amazing election judges serve to help process you all.
We have time for one quick question. I'm sorry, one more question. And if you have questions afterwards, please stick around for our panelists. If you have any questions, then they would be happy to answer them. Go ahead.
It's very quick. You mentioned that September 24th was the first day for early voting ballots to be sent out. Is that also the first day of early voting when people can come in and vote? When is the earliest day that people can come in?
Great question. And early voting and vote by mail mailing out always coincides. So that's not specific to an election. So September 24th is when the vote by mail ballots will begin mailing out. We have about 20,000 on the permanent vote by mail list, and including single, and those will all get mailed out batched together. And then we'll have people request and we send those out. Early voting starts 40 days ahead of the election in the election authority's office. So you'll come to the Bennett Administrative Center. We moved in July. So if you don't know that, we're 102 East Main, right across from the courthouse, and you'll vote right in the Patton meeting room that kind of also expands into the county boardroom. So 40 days you got to, and then we expand to other locations 2 weeks after that.
Michael, do I bring you back up to say goodbye, or would you like me to represent for both of us? Are you sure? We kept the new dad awake, by the way. Thank you all for being here today, for your thoughtful questions, for your commitment to civic engagement. A huge thank you, of course, to Nicole Frydman, Jaye Covert, and Angie Patton for their expertise, their experiences, and their passion. Let's give them a huge round of applause. Thank you to the Spurlock Museum of World Cultures as well, and Good Trouble Lives On partner, all of the organizations, of course, everyone who had something to do with today, and for all of you for being here, and thank you, Eli, for just offering to do this, even though it wasn't an option. So thank you, enjoy the rest of Good Trouble. Please return after lunch. Thank you.